I want to welcome everyone to our video series. We're going to share some insights on the value of an Annapolis Christian education. We're entitling this Room to Grow, for lack of a better title, but it's been Room to Grow has been our school-wide initiative, and we want to be good stewards of the facilities that God's entrusted us, as well as bringing in committed Christian families within the Coastal Bend. So that's the outward-facing part of Room to Grow. This is a little bit more of the inward-facing part of it, where we get to talk about just insight and what it means to have an education here at Annapolis. And this is kind of geared for our existing families. So as a learning community, we want to learn to grow and be a community that is all about learning and growing. So with me is Shayla Floyd. For those who don't know you, could you do a quick introduction?
Sure. Well, as Mr. Lockyer said, my name is Shayla Floyd. I am from North Texas, but have been down in the Corpus Christi, Calallen, Robstown area for the last 23 years. The last 8 years of my professional life, I was head of school at River Hills Christian Academy. I'm married to Jason, who was born and raised in the Calallen area. We have two sons, Jaden, who is a freshman at A&M in College Station, and then Jackson, who is a eighth grader here in Annapolis. Yes, so I'm so thankful to be here and enjoying my first year.
Yep, and Shayla is our 7th through 12th counselor. She works with the students, particularly with college prep, and then our dean of students for grammar students. So we're very happy to have her here. So this episode is about partnering with parents, and we want to talk a little bit just briefly about what it means to partner with the school, with Annapolis, and then also provide and talk about a resource that we have for all of our families called The Classical Difference, and we'll get to that in a minute. Both of us are parents, and it's pretty, when you think about it, it's pretty scary thinking about, I have a junior who is going to leave the nest and be out in the world, and there's a lot to think about as parents. Do you think that it's been easier the older your kids get, or is it harder, or are they both hard just in different ways?
Yes, I would say that's a mixed barrel there. As they mature, certain things do get easier, the tending to minute by minute and the watching over, but no doubt do other things come into life that you feel like you have to watch even closer as they mature. So that's a balancing act, I would say, as our children mature. And as you were mentioning, having a junior, I just know that as we prepared Jaden to leave from home in August, I would stay up nightly almost thinking, did I teach him this? Did I teach him that? Did I teach him this? Then had to have the realization that he's still ours. He's not with us day in and day out, but there are still things that I constantly am teaching him as he's navigating that freshman year in college. So right. They leave, but they don't go away.
Yeah, right. Let's talk about how to build a really strong foundation for our children as they move through this world and face the challenges of growing up, leaving the nest, not ever leaving the family, but there's challenges that they face more and more as they become more responsible, more independent, we hope. And so one of the things that we talk about here at school is a three-legged stool with church, home or family, and school. How do you understand that, or how do you see that analogy working when those three things are working together?
Well, when those three things are working together, the stool is stable, is the way I see it. And so we know from God's word as parents that we are instructed to raise our children up in the word of the Lord. And so the way that happens is by connecting with a church family. There are first go-to that God's word is being taught in the home, but also being taught in the church. But when we think about the school portion of it, we know that our children are at school for 8 hours a day most of the year. And so if we are to leave that portion out and have a school situation where God's word isn't being promoted and that partnership isn't there with the school, then that stool is unstable.
Right. And I think the one leg of that stool that I think people don't think much of sometimes is the school part of it.
Right.
They think, well, when I went to school, Things were kind of okay. It really didn't matter where I went to school. I just kind of went through and got what I needed to, moved on to college, got, married, family, job, and all of that. But really, as we're finding out more and more, there is an underlying educational philosophy, and that philosophy of how schools are teaching and what they're teaching is really, really critical. Let's talk about worldview, because really a worldview is that philosophy, whatever I believe about the world, and when I put it into action and it starts impacting my thoughts and my actions and how I perceive the culture around me, that's what we mean by a worldview. Why is it so important to have a school based on a Christian worldview? Why is that so important?
The way I see it is that our worldview is constantly being formed. And so whatever is coming into our eyes, our ears, our worldview is constantly being formed. So we know that the world that isn't a biblical worldview is forming our thoughts and our minds in some other direction. So being at a school where the worldview is biblical, then our students are hearing and seeing and practicing God's word throughout their day. And so, yes, we're going to have other worldviews inform us, but then we can quickly decide, does that line up with God's word or not, and make decisions that are very informed based on God's word.
Right.
So having children at a school where God's word is taught from the beginning, and that they are also seeing that acted out by their teachers and by other staff members, by the family members that are here, by the students that are here, then that's constantly impacting and forming that worldview that we desire to be biblical, that they might base their life ongoing on God's word.
Right. And we've talked about this. We have a new teacher orientation, and we're talking about the different types of schools, particularly private Christian schools, and the difference of a school like Annapolis, a classical Christian school. There's some schools that see a secular worldview, and they think that it's just all the stuff that's out there, and they just want to keep everything at bay, and as long as they stay in, kind of sheltered and move everything out there, then that will be, they'll be okay. That the world's out there, and we'll be safe in here. We feel like worldview or worldliness is not in the stuff; it's an attitude. It comes from the heart. So there's no way to keep worldliness out because it's within. Yes. There's also a idea that a school should be basically everything a public school teaches. If you have Bible class and chapel and just kind of add faith to kind of that top layer, kind of at the end of it, then that will be kind of a good, strong foundation. You'll get an education that everyone else gets, plus Bible, plus chapel. Why is that not really a strong leg of the stool?
Well, unfortunately, if you think about the fact that God created this world, he created everything in this world, so to think that you could extract God from any subject matter and really know the truth and the whole of it is false. So when we think about teaching children here at Annapolis in a classical Christian manner, we are looking to interweave God's word throughout every subject matter so that students begin to, yes, understand the world God created, but then also be able to decipher the good and the bad, right from wrong, even in literature class and history and the parts of the timeline that they are learning that they need to be able to really diagnose. Did that follow what God's truth is or not, so that they can then take that on into their life moving forward?
Yeah, Proverbs doesn't say the fear of the Lord is the end of wisdom, like we acquire all of this human wisdom and then we get the fear of the Lord. No, the fear of the Lord is the beginning of wisdom. We start from that premise, and then everything gets built from there, and that's really what Annapolis is built on. When we think biblical worldview, we're thinking that's where we start. The Bible, its foundational piece, fear of the Lord, that's the beginning of wisdom, and then we can filter and decipher all of the books we read, the history, all that stuff through that filter. And I think that really is what sets us apart as a school, because we're really committed to that as a school. Well, as a parent, like I mentioned, there's a lot going on. There's a lot of like crazy stuff going on. There is a resource that we have provided as a school for parents to kind of help them walk through that and to understand a little bit more about what we're doing as a school. Sure. And that's the magazine called The Classical Difference, which we have a copy of, the most recent one. And there are several pictures actually from Annapolis in there, including Karis Falcone's winning art piece that won a National Art Award, her watercolor. It's a beautiful piece. And there's a couple other pictures in there, I think some kindergarten graduation and whatnot. So, but there are some really interesting articles in there, and maybe we can briefly just walk through a couple key ones and really encourage parents to, hopefully they've gotten the magazine. If they haven't, let us know as a school. We'll get you signed up. You can also find that, The Classical Difference online and get a free look at it, and you can actually subscribe to it online as well. So what's the first article that kind of caught your attention in that?
Well, just as I turned through the magazine, what I noticed was that the articles are relatively short, and so I was able to read through them and get the gist of the information quickly. The first thing that I noticed was that it gave a great book review on Battle for the American Mind by Pete Hegseth, and so that review went through and talked about the book and also gave a QR code to scan, and you can go in and look at different reviews of the book. Another one of the articles that stood out greatly to me, and this is something that I come across with parents talking to me about, and I've even come across in my own personal life, is just children dealing with anxiety. And so we know that that's one of the things that is part of our world, and there's an article on page 10 titled 5 Lessons to Help Your Child with Anxiety, and it gives just very practical ways to talk with children about anxiety, to help them through that anxiety, and to put some things into place in the home that will really help fortify the connections that are being made. So I thought that was excellent. When we flip on through, there's a journey from Scotland to America that talks just some interesting facts there about how some children came to be here in America. One of the ones that stood out to me, though, and we heard this talked about at conference this summer, it's titled The Cigarette of the 21st Century. And a student spoke on this. It was their thesis, and it's about the cell phone. And so parents that are either in the midst of having children with cell phones and are dealing with the difficulties of that, or maybe parents of younger children that are looking to try to decide, oh my goodness, how do we navigate this? Some really great information there in that article. It also has a link to take you to listen to the student actually deliver that address that she gave at conference this summer, which was just excellent. Then the last two things I want to point out is there is an article about House. And so for anyone that has students in the School of Logic or Rhetoric, it gives a little rundown of really how House looks at one particular school that is an ACCS school. And then the magazine winds up with a interesting part for parents that have kiddos about to go off to college or prepping. It's called College Corner. And so college and the use of useless studies. And it goes into the fact that, well, there really aren't any useless studies. Right. We can put all those things to use. So whether you are a parent of a young child in pre-K or kindergarten, all the way through junior or senior year in high school, there is something that the Classical Difference has to offer, and really just the mindset of it would bring us together as we continue to read these articles and do the research that goes into just knowing what resources are out there so that we are all talking and thinking on the same page. Right.
The greater that partnership is between the school and home and church, when there's great understanding as far as what we're doing here at school, you start incorporating those things at home. I know at the dinner table, when they start discussing books and talking about the school as a parent, knowing what's going on or at least knowing more about what's going on helps you kind of reinforce what the teachers are talking about, what we're trying to do here at school. Just it really, really deepens those roots for those students going forward. So, so that's a great resource. We highly recommend The Classical Difference, the school, has paid for subscription for all of our families. So if you didn't get one, let us know. We'll add you to the mailing list. But again, it's a great resource for you. So we'll end this time again just talking about the value of a school that mirrors what you're doing at home. I hear so many parents talk about just even like boys holding doors for girls and yes ma'am and yes sir and those kind of things. Why is it so important for school and for the students to practice even the smallest details of life, reinforcing what they're doing at home? Why is that so important to have that part in your repertoire as a parent?
Wow. Well, I just see the fact that we are raising up young men and women that will eventually go out to serve this world. So in that thought process of, yes, we may have a kindergartner on our hands, but before we know it, that's going to be a junior in high school. And all those little moments in between, as we can reinforce the day-to-day interactions that they're going to have with one another, whether it be classmates in the school or siblings at home or friends at church or play dates, as they learn those interactions that, yes, to some extent can be just respectful, we know that all ties back to the fact that the Lord teaches us to honor others above ourselves.
Right.
And so we're just teaching that day by day by these little interactions that they have with one another. And then the correction that goes along whenever possibly it didn't roll off as we would hoped it would.
Right.
Yes, just raising up these young men and women to go out and serve the world in the way that the Lord has called us to.
Yeah, and it makes a big difference, that maybe teaching someone to be polite just because you want to be a good citizen versus teaching someone to be polite and respectful because you're honoring the Lord and you're serving the Lord and you're loving your neighbor. It's such a deeper, more meaningful reason and motivation to do it. And it's not self-serving, but it's serving the Lord. Mm-hmm. That's really ultimately what we're looking for, is raising up young men and women that will impact the next generation for the Lord. So,
absolutely.
Well, thank you, Shayla, for your time. And we appreciate you spending some time with us. And we hope to put together a couple more videos, again, just to show you the value of what it means to be an Annapolis Christian Academy warrior. So thank you.